Good morning. This is Father Stephen Kelly from St. John's Church in Detroit. We're continuing our series of daily morning meditations where we generally look at one or another lessons that are assigned for morning or evening prayer, what is known as the Daily Office Lectionary. And I thought we'd take a look today at the lesson that's assigned from the first book of Kings. Now remember, we were in 1 and 2 Samuel, and in that we heard the story about the coming of the kings of Israel, how God didn't really want them to have kings, but they begged, and so God allowed it. The first king, of course, was Saul. That didn't go so well. And then David was chosen, and David, of course, because of his moments of unfaithfulness, God said he will not have a reign without turmoil and war his entire time, and that was true. And then after his death, Absalom tried to take over the throne when the throne was in fact intended for Solomon. So now we're here, first book of Kings, the 3rd chapter, and Solomon is in fact the king of Israel. And we know that he was one of great wisdom. Well, and how do we know that? Well, this is one of the stories that helps us to see the example. 1 Kings 3, beginning at verse 16. Then came there 2 women that were harlots unto the king and stood before him. And the one woman said, O my lord, I and this woman dwell in one house, and I was delivered of a child with her in the house. And it came to pass the 3rd day that after I was delivered, that this woman was delivered also, and we were together. There was no stranger with us in the house, save we 2 in the house. And this woman's child died in the night because she overlaid it. And she arose at midnight and took my son from beside me while thine handmaid slept, and laid it on her bosom, and laid her dead child in my bosom. And then I arose in the morning to give my child suck, and behold, it was dead. But when I considered it in the morning, behold, it was not my son, which I did bear. And the other woman said, Nay, but the living is my son, and the dead is thy son. And this said, No, but the dead is thy son, and the living is my son. Thus they spake before the king. Then said the king, The one saith, This is my son that liveth, and thy son is dead. And the other saith, Nay, but thy son is the dead, and my son is the living. And the king said, Bring me a sword. And they brought a sword before the king. And the king said, Divide the living child in 2, and give half to one and half to the other. Then spake the woman whose the living child was unto the king, for her bowels yearned for her son, and said, O my lord, give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. But the other said, Let it be neither mine nor thine, but divide it. Then the king answered and said, Give her the living child, and in no wise slay it, for she is the mother thereof. And all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had judged, and they feared the king, for they saw the wisdom of God was in him to do judgment. Now, of course, it sounds horrifying, right? And Solomon wasn't actually ever going to divide the baby. But he knew that the one whose baby it really was would be willing to sacrifice having it in order to spare the life of the child. But the woman whose child was dead was bitter and upset and broken. And of course, her reaction, unfortunately, was to try to deny not only the woman her child, but if she couldn't have one, then she shouldn't have one either, right? And is that just an example of human sinfulness, right? It's what human beings do when we're sinful. We can be very selfish at times. But the example for this, of course, is that wisdom that Solomon has received would be good for the kingdom of God. In fact, what was Solomon going to be most famous for? Was the building of the temple, right? David wanted to build a temple for the Ark of the Covenant, for the Ark of God, and God said that it wouldn't happen during his time, but it would happen during Solomon's time, and he would do many wonderful and wise things. Unfortunately, Solomon will also do many sinful and selfish things as well, as we will see as we advance through the book of Kings. And unfortunately, even though God promised that there would always be an heir of David on the throne, and in fact there would be after the kingdom of Israel is divided into 2 kingdoms, there will always be an heir of David, that in fact the ultimate heir will be Jesus Christ himself. So that's part of the journey that we're following through the scriptures. So today is Saturday. We do have a wedding today. Thanks be to God for Eric and Jessica's wedding. And so that is a good, joyous occasion, but otherwise no public worship. But I do hope that you're saying your prayers and, of course, preparing to come to church tomorrow. 7:30 morning prayer, 8 o'clock Holy Communion, 10 o'clock Holy Communion, and 5:30 evening prayer. And I do hope we'll see you in church. May God bless you.